Hi, I'm the True Gamer, giving up my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Let's talk about clones for a moment, and how weird they are in some regard. In our happy medium, it's not so weird to see a game have so many similar gameplay elements that you could basically say these are the same game with only the barest essentials changed. And note, I'm not decrying that's a thing, that just happens with all mediums. It's just something I noticed that it happens a little more than you would think that would be happening in our medium. And honestly, the reason for it happening is a bit sad when you actually start thinking about it, because it's mostly the mainstream media that does it, and just that's mostly because of trend chasing in the AAA medium. Yeah, publishers have a bad tendency to copy whatever is popular with maybe some minor differences. Sure, that's always been a thing, but now it's been more ramping up if anything. And now that's not to say that new stuff isn't happening, it's just that the new stuff is just done by, indie companies. I'm just sort of lamenting this sort of change, since before you could have a bunch of other types of games out there and still have those, trend chasing games. Like, all those shooters out there, which actually thinking about it now, shooters have been kind of dead as a genre, hasn't they? I mean, in that sense of, nothing really new has really changed them. I mean, there is not a particular game out there that changes the real, how you actually control them. Though you might be asking yourself, okay, but why am I mentioning all this? Well, that's because today we're talking about a game that really did leave these thoughts on me about clones in gaming. That being Sleeping Dogs. By now, most people already know the history of Sleeping Dogs, but I'll go over it since might as well. Sleeping Dogs was originally a true crime game, but Activision was like, we're not gonna get all the money in the world from it, just better off to give it to someone else. Which, they sold it to Square Enix, which they renamed it to Sleeping Dogs because they didn't own the true crime name, which, doesn't really matter that much. And during its lifetime, it sold over around at least over 2 million copies, and was considered a failure by Square Enix. What the hell? Seriously, unreasonable expectations are just going to be always unreasonable. And honestly, there's not much to say then. Let's get started on this undercover operation of Hong Kong with Sleeping Dogs. The game begins with our main character, Wei, and another guy who is not important, at a drug deal that goes very badly, and are soon arrested. While in prison, we meet Jackie Ma, an old friend of his before he left Hong Kong. Wei tries to buddy up with him to try to gain into a group called the San On Yi, a triad group that's in charge of the area. But why would Wade want to join that type of group? Well, we quickly learned that he's actually an undercover cop. He was actually brought in due to his history of the area, and also because the last guy died, because he was found out. Yeah, the San On Yi are very brutal against any traitors, so your job is to try to stay low while trying to rise up the ranks and so you can bust them. However, that means you will have to do stuff so you aren't caught. Some of which is illegal, which I don't hold against the game, since in this aspect a lot of people don't know or wouldn't care to know, since cops aren't allowed to do stuff undercover unless their lives are at risk. The best they can try to do is actually lampshade they do illegal stuff, but still not be doing, illegal stuff. So some of this stuff shouldn't be allowed in-game, but I am willing to give it a pass since it's just using it for dramatic effect and gameplay. So that way the player isn't like, gotta have to keep holding back every time. Which is fair enough. Or not, as we'll get into in a bit. In any case, after being free, we meet with Jackie, and on the way we meet one of the Triad bosses. Or try to until we get attacked by 18K members. Who are they? I honestly don't know. They seem to be a rival crime group, but they don't actually elaborate on who the hell they are. But it really doesn't matter because they're not a real thing, if that makes sense. I'll try to get into that later. But in any case, this is where we begin to talk about combat, which is a bit weird since it's a melee-focused game in an open-world game. Since usually melee combat kind of requires more closed-in environments to make sure random elements don't intercede into the gameplay, which would actually be interesting, but another time to talk about. This is where a lot of the comparisons to the Arkham games and GTA come in, where they say it's basically a clone of those two games. However, to be fair to the game, I would actually like to make the comparison to another game, that being Yakuza, since if anything it has more in common with that game. So in combat, you have a light and heavy attack, which is like Yakuza, but heavy attacks can only be done by holding the normal attack button at the end of a move, which does make it different, but on the other hand, it can make it tricky to actually use them when you want to, because sometimes you're pressing it a few times and then you forget, wait, am I supposed to hold it here? Which can dramatically change how you do moves. Plus also, you're just way too open whenever you use them, because they take a lot longer just to do because it has to read the hold button, with also the game being a little more aggressive at times with its enemies. Though luckily you do have the counter mechanic, which allows you to, counter them. This is where the comparison to the Arkham game come in, where basically your counter is just pretty powerful and is very useful against all foes, because none of them really have a counter to it, and it's pretty much guaranteed damage, and using it to open up a guard to either combo them or stop them to deal a lot of damage. However, unlike the Arkham games, they don't lead into the next attack, more putting you back into a neutral spot with a minor advantage, but that's it. I would put it more to the level of something like a Tiger Drop from the Yakuza game, where it's good damage overall, but it just puts you back in a neutral spot. There's also the grab mechanic, which is where the more well-known mechanic comes in. See, after you grab someone, you can do the standard punch them in the face or throw them, but you can also drag them to a thing and slam their heads in, or if you're hitting to a red highlighted object, you can either knock them out or kill them straight up, which is actually one of the more broken mechanics since it basically is a free knockout for very little work. In fact, most times than not, I kinda limit myself from actually using them because they were too easy. That and also I wanted to make sure that I understood all the complexities of the mechanics without relying on it. And for the most part, that's actually all of the mechanics in the game. Yeah, provided there are other mechanics we'll get into in a moment, but for the most part, everything I just told you is the entirety of the combat. It honestly got boring after the first hour because it's shown you everything it can do. And honestly, the gameplay wouldn't be so boring if it wasn't so extended. I'll get into that in a bit. It's very unlike Yakuza, where in that game's case, the combat does evolve over time and giving you more and more mechanics to sink your teeth into. Which can be fun, but also has more mechanics to just give it more depth in general, like the heat gauge and heat moves. Though speaking of gauges, something I just noticed that I didn't put in my script, I didn't talk about the face meter. Basically in combat, the more you do well in it, the more the bar fills, and after it fills up, you're basically getting regen health and a slightly more damage, but that's it. It's useful if you're kinda going against a lot of enemies and having a hard time, but otherwise it's not that useful. Which is also how I would describe the upgrade system, which we will go into now. See, throughout the game, you gain Triad and Cop XP. You see, in missions, when you do melee combat, basically you'll gain a lot of Triad XP because, it's the main combat. With Cop XP being more of the don't do unnecessary damage to anyone and don't hurt innocent. That's basically how it works. Though after a while, I started to notice that this XP is worthless. All the upgrades are superfluous and don't really add anything to the combat, thus I stopped caring to engage with it. And really, any of the benefits they give were not meaningful enough to care about them. And that's not to say there's a non-reasonable reason for why this is. It's mostly because the developers can't assume the player is going to do optional stuff, which is really one of the problems with open world games because, again, they can't assume that you're going to do optional stuff. More times than not, they have to kind of just assume that the player is going to beeline the plot. And granted, Yakuza has this sort of problem as well. However, because of the structure of the game, it can assume a few things, and some of the abilities you gain over time will make you stronger. Plus also, the game is just fun to play already, so trying to do side activities is also fun and gain you really cool stuff. Like, doing a sub-story will unlock this one ability that is really cool. Which, speaking of, let's talk about the face missions. Basically, they are missions where you just do stuff for people, and it's really boring. Most of them don't even compare to one side quest in the Yakuza games. Any of them. They are very simple of, go over there, do stuff. The only one I found really enjoyable was this car chase where one character beats up one guy and then we have to run away from them, with some funny dialogue to go with it, which just overall helped it make it more palatable because, again, most of the face missions are just so samey and blend together, and it doesn't help with the overall lack of anything to do. I think if I put my mind to it, there are barely like 5 things to do in this game alone. And it's weird how Yakuza can have barely a city in it, but be so jam-packed that you can't go 6 feet without going to do something else. There is a reason why I put Yakuza up there, because it basically defines my standards for open world games, because most of them can't even meet the bare essentials at times. In fact, actually, I kind of want to mention this, because this got on my nerves when I realized it. You see, in all of my recordings, I never went to the gambling den. You see, it's basically very far off, out at sea, so you actually have to drive by boat there. So you would think there would be like a lot of gambling games there, just because of, you know, the amount of effort you would have to put in just to get there. Nope. Just Mahjong poker. That's it. Or heck, just adding normal Mahjong. Like, come on! That would have been interesting. Just, why not just fill it up with everything you can? Just to make it at least a worthwhile journey over there. Though then again, it does make me think about something. Like traversing, where basically in Yakuza, it's very simple. Everything's so close to each other you don't have to worry about it, and if something's really far apart, it's just a minute away and it won't take you that long to get there. While here, everything's so far apart that you just ask the simple question of, why do you have these things so far apart? Like, come the hell on, it takes like a few minutes just to get there, and I had to use the taxi system just to get to places at times. Oh yeah, there's a taxi system in this game, it just doesn't tell you about it. And I only used it because driving it just feels bad. Like, it is so bad that I genuinely say that I cannot understand what the hell the developers were thinking when they were designing this, because it's that bad. I mean, like, I had to reset so many times when I was forced to drive because it's just that bad. It's so sluggish, and turning, it's just like, what the heck am I even trying to turn? It's also not helped when the game forces rubber bands on you, where basically your enemies will always catch up to you and your enemies will always drive faster than you until you do something. Then they'll drive normally for some reason rather than just, you know, driving normally. There's also shooting, but it's fine, I guess. It's nothing too stellar, but it's just there, you know what I mean? It's really simplistic and does its job. It's not bad. I have to keep emphasizing that because that's just what I felt. And honest to goodness, I think I could have overlooked all of this if the plot was decent. But it's really not. The biggest issue with the game, for me at least, that it doesn't do enough to make me care about the characters in this entire plot. That's not to say that the plot doesn't try, it tries with a few characters, but for the most part, it falls flat and doesn't do anything worth of value. The best way to put the problem is that while they try to make you care about them, they don't actually give you anything to actually care about. To give an example, Winston. The guy, for the most part of his appearance, is just an angry guy who's not given anything more than being a brute who's angry at everyone. He doesn't show any depth at all, and before somebody mentioned this scene that I'm showing right now, no, I don't count that. That's some bullshit. It doesn't even go in line with anything about the character himself. Or heck, when he's about to be married and it's just like, oh, it's a thing now, with none of the insight of what it means for him and what he does. Hell, we don't even learn why they got married or any insight on how Peggy, his fiancée, feels about him being a criminal or even as a person. The game just expects you to like him, but does nothing to develop his character in order to make you care about him. And to be clear, I'm not saying that he had to change his character. I just needed more insight. That's what it means to develop a character. It can mean to grow him as a character, but more times than not, it's usually there to, gain insight of a character. I went out of my way to say that just because I know someone out there is going to say, well, of course he's not going to change. Not understanding the proper use of the word develop. And it's weird because there is a sort of example of making me care about one of the characters in this game, that being Jackie. A semi-side character who's at least developed enough to be a best friend character. He's basically a low-rank henchman level minion thing at best, with only ever getting anywhere with the help of Wei, and does sacrifice himself to help Wei. And that's mostly because they gave us scenes developing his character, showing off the different angles of it, and allowing us to enjoy that. However, even then, he feels lacking because he rarely shows up in the plot, if ever at times, and is only there to do stuff for the plot, rather than being an actual fleshed out character. And that's mostly because there are a lot of pointless scenes. I know that sounds confusing, so I'll try to explain. You see, in this game, there's a format for how each mission works. So you go to the spot, cutscene, that sets up what you need to do. Drive, maybe there's some dialogue there. You get there, do the thing, a wrap up cutscene. That's pretty much it. That is pretty much how the game plays out all the time, and while there are exceptions, they are just outliers that do nothing to help with the overall pace. Okay, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Well, it's once I learned that there was this system of how missions work, I basically kinda then realized, hey, wait a moment. Some of these missions don't actually matter in the grand scheme of the plot. Like, Sung's cop missions, they don't really matter, or at least the first one. Like, only the first one actually matters. Everything after that with her don't really matter. Or heck, this one mission where you had to take this guy on a tour, but it doesn't really matter because he's only here for one scene and one scene only, and then just moves along. Hell, even then, it could have been useful to actually define Wei's character, when he's barely a character in here. Yes, I am even implying that our main character is really boring, who I could not care less about, and felt in all honesty, if he was replaced with some other character, it wouldn't change the plot that much except the beginning, which is negligible after a while. Wei has really nothing that defines him as him. Like, can you tell me anything about him that's not because of the case? By that I mean, what is he like when he's not on the case? Is he more chilled out, or is he always like this? He feels so ill-defined, and it's really annoying. Like, for example, why did he join the police in America? Did he become an undercover cop for the sole purpose of destroying the Sun On Yi and Dog Eyes? His backstory is very lackluster, and the only part that really matters is his sister died of an overdose, which is still sad, but my point stands that we don't care about her. Because they have never put her on screen or even give us a scene that actually defines her as a character, or even anything worth of value about her. And mind you, I have this same critique for Yuki, I'm trying to remember her name, Nishikiyama's sister, from the first game. Like, it's really confusing nowadays when you actually start thinking about it, because they just have her there, and they actually barely expanded upon her in one of the prologue movies, which is actually alright, but I'm getting off topic. Point being, it's stupid there, and it's stupid here. I mean, heck, what does he want to do with his spare time? I have literally no idea of his personality at all. One might say, that's the point. He's standing the line between the two halves of himself. And well, if there's no separation between the two, I can't tell that. Heck, if anything, he could be a little inconsistent at times. An example of this is where we meet Raymond, his overseer for the mission, who's basically like, blah blah blah, follow the rules, yada yada. And Wade goes like, dude, we play on separate rules, man. It works different. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's a bit cocky, he thinks the rules need to be bent at times just to get the job done. Then, after a bit, Pendrew, his boss, does something that makes Wade go, what the fuck, man? And it's like, what? And Pendrew's like, dude, get over it. It's part of the job. What needs to be done? Which really got me concerned because why would Wade care? It's nothing different than anything else he does. So why is he angry? In fact, I think the scene was only here to teach you about the shooting mechanic, and to also make use of the girlfriend mechanic. Oh, let me explain that. You see, one of the biggest pushes for the game was the use of big names that try to market it, but they are so underutilized that they don't even matter in any context. Which is weird because they actually had a good cast here. Like, the voiceovers is done fine enough. I think Sub did better than others. Jackie, for example, did really well. And Wei at times felt like he was being told to do two different voices at times, and it's weird. Though that's not to say he can't do good voiceovers, because he can. I've seen him in Yakuza 7 and he's stellar there as Masato. It's also weird that no one ever mentions that Liu Kang, the actor for Liu Kang, is in this game. It's really weird. So sad about his career though. Anyway, back to the girlfriends, and they don't matter in any scenario whatsoever, because they don't add anything to the plot, or just anything really. They're only there to be able to allow you to find all the collectibles. That is it. And yes, one of them does introduce you to your old master, but that could have been done by literally anyone else. Because I keep wanting to repeat this, the only thing they add is nothing. They don't matter. And Yakuza does have the hostess girls, but they are sidestepped always and are never forced upon you. And even then, they're not that interesting or even impactful for me because they don't matter, because they don't reveal shit about Wei's character. They don't matter. In fact, I could say that about a lot of characters. Conroy, this guy who's a part of the gang and has trust issues with you until you do the thing, where everyone begins to actually trust you, and then he just kind of stops being a thing after that, doesn't really matter. This guy doesn't really matter. He was just here for the mission and then quickly gets thrown out because he didn't matter. This guy who's technically our boss doesn't matter. This guy doesn't matter. No one matters, and I couldn't care less. In the Yakuza games, while they could have really, really long-winded cutscenes trying to explain stuff, they do more to make you care about even minor characters due to them giving them the time and effort to show up why you should care about them. Though when I say care, I mean in that sense of wanting to see more of them or seeing them get knocked down. You know what I mean? There are a lot of characters in this series that are just done justice with a lot of things that define their characters. Heck, it made me care about this one character who stabbed our main protagonist and spat on his kindness due to the character growth he had later. It's all about using what you have and giving it the time needed to shine properly. So when you do anything with a character, it can have weight, which this story does not have. Oh, you want a plot summary now? I mean, might as well, because not a lot happens and I can just simply summarize everything to a few words. Which is not a bad critique in and of itself, but because it goes on for so long, it starts to get on my nerves for it not mattering. So what happens? After joining up with the son of Yi, Winston invites you to his wedding because of some other nonsense. And oh my god, they die! Shock. Like I cared. Uncle Po, the leader of the son of Yi, is dying and choosing a successor, and Big Smile Lee, oh yeah, this guy is just some other guy who's in charge of us, doesn't really matter, wants to be that and is trying to rise up the rank. But after a few missions, we stop and the game ends with our real boss being the actual bad guy because he was a corrupt cop. And it's just like, whatever, I really don't care. I want to mention the DLC for a moment, sorta, because there's one DLC I wanted to mention. Basically, it's a DLC that takes place, and it's stated to take place after the main game. But again, suffers from the issue of none of it really mattering because it's not there to be there, it's just more content. That is it. It had so much potential to show off his new life after the end of the game, showing off where he is now and actual effects on him. Nope, just nothing matters. At the end of the day, this game is really boring and I'm still surprised to this day why the hell people like this game. The core idea is really interesting and could have been really done well, but it didn't matter because they didn't care about that. And it's just, what the fuck? Here's something that really did get on my nerves when I realized it. Did you know this game had 6 writers? 6 of them. 6 writers, and none of them could combine together to make an interesting plot. That is just, ugh. In any case, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it or not, comment below. Tell me what I did wrong. Did I get anything wrong? Do tell. I need to know this stuff or else I can't get better. Because remember, folks, the wise man is always looking for more. A fool doesn't.